On June 6, 1944, the world witnessed one of the most ambitious and daring military operations in history, the Normandy Landings, commonly known as D-Day. This massive assault marked the beginning of the end of World War II, as Allied forces launched a full-scale invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. The operation, codenamed Operation Overlord, was the largest amphibious invasion ever undertaken, involving thousands of ships, aircraft, and soldiers. The success of D-Day was not just a triumph of military strategy. It was a testament to the courage, determination, and sacrifice of the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy. This is the story of D-Day, a day that changed the course of history, the road to D-Day. By 1944, World War II had been raging for nearly 5 years. The Allies had fought hard to gain the upper hand in Europe, but Nazi Germany still held a firm grip on much of the continent. The Soviet Union was pushing back the Germans on the Eastern Front, but a second front in Western Europe was needed to relieve the pressure on Soviet forces and accelerate the defeat of the Third Reich. The decision to open this second front was made at the Tehran Conference in 1943, where the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin, agreed on the necessity of a cross-channel invasion. Planning for the invasion began in earnest, with the Allies selecting Normandy, a region in northern France, as the landing site. Normandy was chosen because it was less heavily defended than the Pas de Calais, where the Germans expected an invasion. However, the challenges were immense. The Allies had to coordinate land, sea, and air forces across multiple nations, ensuring that everything came together seamlessly on the day of the invasion. The success of D-Day would hinge on deception, surprise, and the bravery of the troops who would carry out the assault. The Deception Campaign. In the months leading up to D-Day, the Allies launched an elaborate deception campaign, codenamed Operation Bodyguard, to mislead the Germans about the true location and timing of the invasion. One of the most successful elements of this campaign was Operation Fortitude, which created the illusion that the main invasion would take place at Pas de Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. The Allies used a variety of tactics to deceive the Germans, including the creation of a fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG, under the command of General George S. Patton. Inflatable tanks, dummy landing craft, and false radio traffic were employed to give the impression of a massive buildup of forces in southeastern England. At the same time, the real invasion force was quietly preparing for the assault on Normandy. The deception efforts paid off. The Germans, led by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, were convinced that the invasion would come at Pas de Calais. As a result, they concentrated their best troops and defenses there, leaving Normandy less heavily fortified. This miscalculation would prove to be a critical factor in the success of D-Day. The night before the invasion. On the night of June 5, 1944, the first phase of the D-Day operation began with the deployment of airborne forces. Paratroopers from the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, along with British and Canadian paratroopers, were dropped behind enemy lines in Normandy. Their mission was to capture key bridges, crossroads, and towns, as well as to disrupt German communications and reinforcements. The airborne assault was fraught with danger. Many paratroopers were scattered far from their intended drop zones, landing in swamps, forests, or directly into the hands of German troops. Despite the chaos, these airborne soldiers fought bravely to achieve their objectives, often engaging in fierce skirmishes with German forces. Their actions played a crucial role in preventing the Germans from mounting a coordinated counterattack against the beach landings. As the paratroopers battled behind enemy lines, the Allied naval armada began moving across the English Channel. Over 5,000 ships, ranging from massive battleships to small landing craft, set sail for Normandy under the cover of darkness. The soldiers on board knew that they were about to embark on a mission of unparalleled danger, but they also understood the importance of their task. The fate of Europe rested on their shoulders. The beach landings: Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, the first waves of Allied troops hit the beaches of Normandy. The invasion force was divided into 5 beachheads, each with its own code name: Utah and Omaha for the Americans, Gold and Sword for the British, and Juno for the Canadians. Each beach presented its own unique challenges, and the men who landed there would face a nightmarish ordeal. At Utah Beach, the westernmost landing zone, the American 4th Infantry Division encountered relatively light resistance. Thanks to strong naval gunfire support and the disarray among German defenders, the troops were able to secure the beach with fewer casualties than expected. However, the story was very different at Omaha Beach, where the American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions faced some of the fiercest resistance of the day. Omaha Beach was heavily fortified with concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery positions. The terrain, characterized by steep bluffs overlooking the beach, gave the German defenders a significant advantage. As the American soldiers waded ashore, they were met with a hail of bullets, mortar shells, and artillery fire. Many were cut down before they even reached the water's edge. The carnage at Omaha Beach was overwhelming, with some units suffering over 90% casualties in the first few hours. Despite the chaos and confusion, the American troops at Omaha Beach displayed extraordinary bravery and determination. Small groups of soldiers managed to find gaps in the German defenses and began to climb the bluffs. Slowly but surely, they fought their way inland, neutralizing enemy positions one by one. By the end of the day, the Americans had secured a tenuous foothold on Omaha Beach, but at a terrible cost: over 2,000 casualties, making it the bloodiest of the 5 landing zones. At Gold Beach, the British 50th Infantry Division encountered stiff resistance but was able to push inland, capturing the town of Arromanches and establishing a vital beachhead. Juno Beach, where the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division landed, saw intense fighting as the Canadians battled through a series of strong points and minefields. Despite heavy casualties, they secured their objectives and linked up with the British at Gold Beach by the end of the day. Sword Beach, the easternmost landing zone, was the target of the British 3rd Infantry Division. Here, the troops faced a determined German defense, but with the support of specialized tanks known as Hobart's Funnies, they were able to break through the defenses and advance towards the city of Caen, a key objective of the invasion: the fight for survival. As the Allies fought their way ashore, they faced not only the formidable German defenses, but also the challenges posed by the terrain and weather. The beaches of Normandy were lined with obstacles designed to impede the landing craft, including metal hedgehogs, wooden stakes, and mines. The rough seas made the approach difficult, and many landing craft were swamped or destroyed before they could reach the shore. Once on the beaches, the soldiers had to contend with a brutal combination of enemy fire, exhaustion, and disorientation. The meticulously planned operation quickly descended into chaos, with units becoming separated and leaders being killed or wounded. Communication was difficult, and the men had to rely on their training, instincts, and each other to survive. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Allies persevered. The courage and determination of the soldiers, combined with the overwhelming firepower of the naval and air bombardments, gradually turned the tide in their favor. By the end of D-Day, the Allies had secured all 5 beachheads, though the cost had been high. Over 4,000 Allied troops were killed on June 6th alone, with many more wounded or missing. The inland push, and the liberation of Normandy. Securing the beaches was only the first step in the broader campaign to liberate France. In the days and weeks following D-Day, the Allies faced the daunting task of pushing inland against a determined and well-entrenched German enemy. The bocage country of Normandy, with its dense hedgerows and narrow lanes, provided the Germans with natural defensive positions that slowed the Allied advance. The city of Caen, a key objective for the British and Canadian forces, became the focal point of intense fighting. The Germans, including elite units like the 12th SS Panzer Division, fought tenaciously to hold the city. It would take several weeks of bitter fighting, including Operation Epsom and Operation Charnwood, before Caen was finally liberated in mid-July. Meanwhile, the American forces to the west were engaged in fierce battles to capture the strategically important town of Carentan and the Cotentin Peninsula, including the vital port of Cherbourg. The fighting in this region was brutal, with the Americans facing well-fortified German positions and counterattacks. Nevertheless, by the end of June, the Americans had secured the peninsula and captured Cherbourg, although the port facilities had been heavily damaged by the Germans. The Allied advance was slow and costly, with progress measured in yards rather than miles. The Germans, under the command of Field Marshal Rommel and later Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, launched several counterattacks in an attempt to drive the Allies back into the sea. However, the Allies, supported by overwhelming air power and superior logistics, were able to repel these attacks and continue their advance. Operation Cobra, the breakout from Normandy. By late July 1944, the Allies had built up significant forces in Normandy, and the time had come to break out of the bocage and begin the liberation of France in earnest. Operation Cobra, launched on July 25th, was designed to achieve this breakthrough. Led by General Omar Bradley, the operation involved a massive aerial bombardment followed by a ground assault by the American First Army. The bombardment, which included over 3,000 aircraft, dropping thousands of tons of bombs, shattered the German defenses and created a gap in their lines. The American forces, spearheaded by armored divisions, exploited this gap and began to push rapidly southward. The breakout was a turning point in the Battle of Normandy, as it allowed the Allies to begin encircling and destroying the German forces in the region. The success of Operation Cobra led to the rapid collapse of the German position in Normandy. In mid-August, the Allies launched Operation Tractable and Operation Totalize, which encircled and destroyed the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army in the Falaise Pocket. The remnants of the German forces were forced to retreat eastward, opening the way for the Allies to advance towards Paris. The liberation of Paris and the road to victory. The liberation of Paris, on August 25, 1944, marked the culmination of the Normandy campaign. After weeks of fierce fighting and heavy casualties, the Allies had finally broken out of Normandy and were advancing rapidly across France. The capture of Paris was a symbolic victory, as the French capital had been under German occupation for over 4 years. The liberation of Paris was followed by a series of rapid advances by the Allies, as they pushed the Germans back towards their own borders. By the end of 1944, the Allies had liberated most of France and were preparing to launch an invasion of Germany itself. The success of D-Day and the subsequent Normandy campaign had set the stage for the final defeat of Nazi Germany. Conclusion. The Normandy landings on D-Day were a pivotal moment in World War II, a moment when the tide of the war turned decisively in favor of the Allies. The bravery and sacrifice of the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy, fought through the bocage, and liberated France will never be forgotten. Their actions on that fateful day helped to bring about the downfall of one of the most brutal regimes in history, and ensured that the values of freedom and democracy would prevail. D-Day was not just a military operation, it was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the determination of free people to resist tyranny. As we remember the heroes of D-Day, we honor their legacy and the enduring impact of their actions on the world we live in today.